Okay, let's do this. Jog 3 miles before breakfast. Make it to work by 9. Run out for a salad at lunch. Oh, time to own that meeting at 3. Yes, 10,000 steps. What's next?
Fearless is not hitting snooze. That's the power of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. With more healthy benefits and tools, no one does more to help you live fearless. Sign up at fepblue.org/action by December 14th.
Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It is Friday night, and you're listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. You are listening to one of the highest-rated paranormal radio shows on Blog Talk. No bull, no lies, just a true platform for everyone to share their knowledge and experiences. When searching for the truth, good communication is key. Now, the phone lines are open for questions or stories. The number to call is 661-244-9831. Make sure you press the number 1 to get into the queue, and we'll try to get to you as soon as we can. Otherwise, our chat room is open, so you can post any comments or questions there as well. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paranormal Review Radio. You'll find more articles, blogs, and full show uploads. And if you have specific questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us at paranormal.review@aol.com. Now, sit back, get comfy, and prepare to open your minds. It's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, first, before we begin, I do want to extend our deepest sympathies and condolences to the people of Paris. I found out a few hours ago as I was driving home tonight about the terrible tragedies that happened there, which is just unbelievable. So, to everyone out there, including our devoted listeners who we do have, many fans in France that email us all the time, we hope you are okay and that we are thinking of you, and, we're here if you need anything.
We're sending our prayers and our love to everyone out there. I just found out a few moments ago, and it just was weird energy all day, and this is horrible, and it's something that shouldn't happen, but it has. So we send prayers and love.
It's actually been weird energy all week.
Yeah,
I don't know about you,
I noticed it a couple days ago.
It just feels very high tense and almost chaotic. And I didn't know if it was just me, myself, and work or whatever, but I just felt that all around all week. And then I noticed some people were talking about it on social media today, how it's been sort of that same world for them. So who knows? Is it the moon? Is it the universe? Or are things shifting or changing? But it's kind of strange out there. So take care, everybody, and keep one eye open if you can. But tonight, we've got an interesting show tonight, so buckle up because it's going to be a really bumpy ride tonight. One of the most chilling and mysterious horror stories ever told is not something made in Hollywood or even from Stephen King. This story comes straight from real life and is still a mystery today. Or is it? 9 experienced Russian hikers set out into the northern Ural Mountains, but no one returned. If you think this is a case of lost hikers injured or possibly even a simple murder or suicide incident, you would be wrong. There are so many twists and turns to this story, your conspiracy theory part of your brain will go into overload. When authorities finally reached the mountains after family members began to get worried when no one telegraphed arrived of the hikers of their return from the mountain, they found the bodies of the 9 hikers, partially clothed, no socks or shoes, some with their eyes taken out, and one with their tongue cut off, just to name a few of the weird and complex injuries they endured. Oh, and did I forget? The temperatures in the area was 15 degrees below zero. So socks and shoes would have been something on these professional hikers. Was this just a case of terrible avalanche that caught the hikers off guard? Was it more of an internal self-destruction of the group on each other? Was it a case of Russian military intervention or maybe indigenous mountain people taking claim to their land? Or is there an unnatural phenomenon that may be the reason? To this day, the Dyatlov Pass Incident case has not been closed. Tonight, Lucy and I will explore the Dyatlov Pass Incident case as it is widely known and go through the case day by day, as well as review each victim's autopsy report. We will also review all of the conspiracy theories and possible reality theories known and purported. In addition, as you know, Lucy and I don't just focus on one thing in particular. We like to go crazy. We like to give a well-rounded review. So we're going to discuss various other mountain ranges around the world that may have similar types of occurrences and mysterious deaths that may help lead to a more definitive answer. So I want to begin by going over the facts we do know. So let's start with the hikers and their first steps on their journey and a little bit about the hikers themselves. So, Lucy, why don't you start off by naming the hikers? I love to start with Lucy.
I want to apologize in advance for butchering any names. So here we go. The first one that we have, his name is Semyon Alexander Zolotarev.
That was very good. Alexander was born in 1921. He was 37 years old, and he stands out like a sore thumb in a group of tourists. He was the oldest of the hikers and the only one who wasn't at the time and had never been a student at UPI. Introducing himself as Sasha, a nickname for Alexander, he spent time in the Russian military during World War II between 1941 and 1946. He apparently impressed enough that he attained the rank of sergeant. In 1946, he transferred to the Leningrad Military Engineering University. Later, he moved to the Minsk Institute of Physical Education. He then began working as a guide at the tourist-based Ardabash in Altai in southern Siberia. Later, he became an instructor at the Kurovskaya tourist base. See, I'm going to mess up some names tonight. There is some speculation that he quit this last job right before the trip that claimed his life, but these people have been unable to verify this. Zolotarev was originally supposed to trek across the Urals with a different group, but his mother had fallen ill and he wanted to go visit her. His first group's itinerary didn't suit him, so the leader of the trip introduced him to Igor Dyatlov, who welcomed the seasoned tourist into his group with open arms. Many people suspect him of being a KGB agent due to his connections with the military. His constant and seemingly random moving around, his giving the name Sasha, and or his switching to Dyatlov's expedition when the itineraries between the two groups only differed by a few days. Although his involvement with the KGB remains unproven, it is a definite possibility. He died on the eve of his 38th birthday.
Okay, the next hiker, his name is Yuri, and he was called Georgy Krivonenchko.
I think that's close. Krivonishenko.
There you go.
I think that's right. In 1959, Krivonishenko was doing pretty well for himself. Even though he was only 26, he had graduated from UPI and was working as an engineer at the Chelyabinsk 40, the secret closed nuclear city south of Sverdlovsk. I'm getting that Russian accent. Don't you try and correct me now. He was a hard and diligent worker. He was a part of the group involved with the cleanup after the Kishtim nuclear accident on September 29, 1957. when a plutonium plant experienced a radioactive leak. Additionally, Krivonishenko was musically inclined and played the mandolin. He had a lively personality, but a volatile temper.
Okay, the next hiker is Alexander Kolatov, and he was also called Kolya.
He was also another character who aroused suspicion. Though he was only 25 years old at the time of the incident, he had already worked for years for a secret laboratory in Moscow, a most impressive feat considering his age and social status. In 1956, when he was only 22, he left his cushy job in the big city and transferred to UPI to study technical physics. He wanted to join the military, leading many to suspect that he, like Zolotarov, had ties to the KGB. He was diligent, methodical, and pedantic young man. The girls on the expedition, Dubinina and Kolmogorova, found him boring. That's bad. He was known to keep meticulous notes on all of his trips, but his journal for his last trip, which is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, his notes from this last trip was never found.
Okay. Now this guy, this is the one name that I have trouble with, and he is Nikolai Thibodeau Brignol.
I'd say you did it. Thibaut Brignol did not have the most promising start. His father was a French communist who had been executed during Stalin's reign of power. He was even born inside a prison camp. Despite his not-so-great beginnings, he was an adventurous and had a good sense of humor. He had just graduated from UPI with a degree in civil engineering at the time of the incident. He was working as a foreman for a company in Sverdlovsk. I'm so sorry.
Okay, and then our next hiker is Rustem Slobodin.
He was the wealthiest member of the group. Slobodin was another UPI graduate at just 23 years old. He had landed a job as an engineer, known as Rustic to his friends. He, like Krivonishenko, was musically inclined. He even brought his mandolin along on the expedition. It was one of the items found by a rescue team in the cache. He was the son of a university professor, but he was known to be down-to-earth and humble. He particularly enjoyed running marathons.
Okay. And the next hiker, he was actually the leader of the group, and this was Igor Dyatlov.
And at the time of the incident, Dyatlov was 23 years old and fifth year in UPI's radio engineering program, scheduled to graduate later in 1959. He was very much into radios. He built many shortwave radios himself, despite them being illegal in the Soviet Union at the time, and photography. He was selling his photographs to newspapers by the time he entered high school. He was also drawn to tourism. He had a profound appreciation and respect for nature, and he was an avid tourist in the most Russian sense of the word. He was a star at UPI, so much so that they had asked him to stay on as an experienced ski tourist after his graduation late that year. Dyatlov was the leader of the 1959 expedition, which is why it's called the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and the one of whom the pass later became named. He helped design and built both the stove and the tent that the group used on their journey.
One thing I want to mention about that, the word tourist, to the Russians at this time, the definition of tourist wasn't somebody that just went on vacation. It was actually an adventurer.
Right, it was a hiker.
So then we go,
adventure. Yeah,
a hiker adventurer. Now the next one is one of the two women that were on the trip, and this is Zinaida Kolmogorova, and she was called Zina.
Zinaida was known to her friends as Zina. She was a 22-year-old tomboy in her fourth year at UPI, studying radio engineering like Dyatlov. She was well-liked by nearly everyone she met. Even the children the tourists met in Sarah begged her to stay with them and head their children's group. She had formerly dated Durashenko, another of the tourists in the group. Their relationship had been quite serious, but they had broken up in January 1959. She was once bitten by a viper while on a hike, and she refused to let the others carry her load because she didn't want to inconvenience them. That's a strong woman.
Mm-hmm. The next hiker is Yuri Doroshenko.
Doroshenko, I like saying that, was still a student at UPI. He had one time dated Kolmogorova. Their relationship had been serious enough that he had visited her parents in Kamensk-Urals, but they had been broken up sometime before the expedition in 1959. Their breakup was said to be amicable. He was modest and reserved, keeping his emotions to himself for the most part.
And then the next hiker is the other woman that was on the trip, and this is Ludmila Dubanya.
She's also known as Ludia. At 20, was the youngest of the group. She was a third-year student at UPI, studying engineering and economics. She enjoyed singing and photography. She was a petite, friendly, blonde woman who was known for being outspoken and perhaps overly opinionated. Friends recall that she sometimes got herself in trouble with her words. She had been shot in 1957 when, during a hike in eastern Saya Mountains, another tourist had mishandled a rifle and injured her. She became the group's medic after Yudin turned back. She was also the official photographer of the group.
And then we have the next hiker, who is Yuri Yudin.
Now, Yuri Yudin was the only surviving member of the group, but he actually turned off on the expedition on the first day, so he never actually made it to the Ural Mountains. He had suffered a lifelong illness and a former injury, and he had turned back at the second 70 while the rest of the group journeyed on. Some report that he was a geology student, while others claim he studied engineering. Donnie Eicher, author of Dead Mountain, The Untold Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, had an interview with Yuri Yudin not long before Yudin's death. Eicher, in his book, states that Yudin was a geology student, so I tend to believe, well, this guy says, he tends to believe that Yuri Yudin didn't do many interviews, so Eicher's interview is one of the most reliable in his opinion. So Yuri was with the group. There was actually a group of 10, and Yuri had a lifelong illness, and on I think it was the second day on this trek, he was so ill that he had to turn back and go home. Lucky guy, I have to say.
Well, Yuri, he actually suffered from rheumatism, he had a heart condition, right, and he had chronic knee and back pain.
So there you have the hikers and a little bit about them per se, about their characters. You may notice of what we were talking about as I was describing them. One had a volatile temper, one had a big mouth. I'm sorry, someone just knocked on my door, and no one's in my house.
Are you serious? Open that door and see.
I swear to God, hold on.
Open that door.
Nobody's here.
Leave that door open. I want to see. I want to watch.
All right. So here you have the descriptions of these guys, and as I was mentioning in the description of them, one had a volatile temper. One woman was sort of, she was opinionated. She had a big mouth. She would say what she wanted to do. And a couple of the members in the group, people thought afterwards that they could have been possibly part of the KGB, which we'll get into a little bit later. So there's a mix of personalities here, and not just the incident itself is a mystery, but I think the backgrounds of these hikers are as much of a history as the actual incident itself. So we'll get into the actual, not so much day by day, but we'll get into the trekking leading up to the point of which the incident possibly happened, because I don't know the exact date of when it happened, and talk about what they were going through at that time. So, Lucy, do you have any notes? I don't know if you've got any notes of the timeline of when they first started to trek, like the date and everything, and where they were going.
Well, let's see my timeline here. Oh, let me go back over here. January 31st is the last entry that is in their book, and I'm trying to see when they took off. I didn't read. Honestly, I did not write that down, and I do apologize. It was in January when they took off.
Right, in January 25th, 1959, that's when they first started to travel by train. And that's when the group arrived at Ivdel. It's a central city in the northern province of here we go with that name again, Sverdlovsk Oblast, where they stayed over one night. And this is where Yuri was as well, Yuri Yudin, who was the only surviving member of this group. So that was January 25th, 1959. On January 26th, when the group left, they caught a local passenger or local resident, basically, who gave them a lift on their truck. And they went to Vichy, where they stayed the night there as well. Then on January 27th, the group starts to march towards the Gora Orderton from Vichy, which is it's leading up to the mountain area. And as they're trekking on this mountain area, the next day on January 28th, that's when Yuri Yudin became ill again. I guess it must have been the cold, or it may have been the traveling, what have you. That's when he turned back to Vichy, back to where they actually caught the resident who was able to truck them in. He trekked back home and stayed there. So that left with the 9 hikers that we just spoke about just before. On January 31st, this is where the group reaches the edge of the highland zone where they break away from the river. They spend the day preparing for the climb, and according to the march plan, they intended to leave a stock of supplies in a corn chandler's shop. However, another account suggests that they actually constructed a shelter in a nearby wooded area for the same reason. So I'm not sure if they wanted to sort of plant things, supplies, food and such, so that when they did return, if there was anything that happened on their journey, at least they had something to, when they came back from this trek, from this they would have food and they'd have supplies on their way back home. On February 1st, the group then set off, which would be their sort of last campsite. The distance that they will travel is not great, and it's only about 2.5 miles, although the steep incline through this forest, as well as the weather and the snow conditions, may have created the journey to slow them down a little bit. And that was in the morning on February 1st. In the afternoon of February 1st, towards the evening, going into the 2nd, they find themselves on the slopes of the Kholat Syakhl, which is the Mansi name. And Mansi is what, Lucy?
The Mansi are the indigenous people that live in that area. They tend to be, now the description of them, they tend to be a peaceful people, but some of the theories revolve around these people. The mountain that they actually went on, and I have the name of the mountain as the Holatachal Mountain. Some people seem to think that there are sacred grounds there, sacred rocks on the mountain, and possibly that the hikers may have ventured into that. But discoveries afterwards is that there's nothing sacred on that mountain for the Mansi. And also, too, they said that there was actually a previous incident on the mountain where some Mansi people were killed on the mountain. The sacred rocks of the Mansi, they're actually about 100 to 150 kilometers from where the hikers were found, where their bodies were found. The closest Mansi settlement to this mountain was 60 miles away. So the Mansi, they tended to stay away from Holatachal Mountain, and it actually held no sacred value to them.
But, I think everybody needs to take into consideration, this is not a, hiking in, if you're thinking of America, if it's the Appalachian Mountains or, the West Coast Mountains, I'm not too sure, but it's not the winter that you're thinking of. This is severe cold weather. You're talking negative 13, negative 15. It actually went up to negative 20 degrees at one point. So it is brutally, brutally ice cold. And at the point of which on February 1st, that these 9 hikers were trekking across what is known as, from the Mansi tribe, as what they call it as Dead Mountain. There was a huge snowstorm. So now, compacted with this severe temperature weather, you've got a huge storm now in their way that's impeding them from going further to where they actually wanted to go. And so what they had to do at this point on February 1st was set up camp somewhere. But this is where everything starts to get, and when I say mysterious, I'm probably going to say that 100 times tonight, but that is such an understatement for this story in particular, because they needed to set up camp in this area and around, what's the name of this area again? The Kholat-Syakhl Mountains. The area where the campsite was found and everything, and their bodies were found, was an open area. Now, if you're a professional hiker, you know for sure never, especially in a storm, never to set up tent in an open area, because you need protection from wind, you need protection from animals, you need the resources that you can find within your area to give you that protection. Now, I think it was maybe not even 300 feet away, there was a wooded area. These hikers, maybe it was because they could not see because of the weather, I'm not sure, but they could have actually went down to this wooded area, this forest area, and set up camp there. They would have gotten a lot more protection from the animals, from the wind, from the storm itself, and had better protection for themselves. But they set up camp right out in the open, and that's where their last campsite was set. But that's where the story begins. And so,
okay.
Go ahead.
Couple things I wanna go over right here. Now, just to give you an idea, all of these people were experienced hikers. They were considered grade 2 certified hikers. And part of the reason for this trip, upon completion, they would receive a grade 3 certification. Now, this requires the candidates to cover at least 186 miles of ground. A third of those have to be in challenging terrain. The minimum duration for the trip was to be 16 days, with no fewer of those spent in uninhabited regions and at least 6 nights spent in the tent. Once they completed this hike, then the certifications that they had they would be called Masters of Sport. And this was the goal of the hikers in the group, so this way they could teach hiking to other people. Now, they were warned about this area. There was a local forester who warned them about the winds that were up there. But one of the things that Yuri Yudin, the survivor, had said when he was talking about Igor, after Igor had expressed the group's intention to reach Orotin Mountain, the forester had strongly advised them not to do this. But Yuri says that Igor tended to like adventure, and he tended to like very dangerous adventure, like he got a rush from it. So this is part of the reason that I think maybe that they decided to put the camp out in that open area. I mean, this was part of their attempt to get that certification.
Sure, but you know what, though? The funny thing is, though, that's not... I could understand if they found the bodies inside the tent frozen or died of hypothermia. But that is not how these 9 hikers were found. And that's what I'm saying. This is where the mystery begins. I can understand, underestimating, your strength and your vigor and your stamina to get through such a beast of a mountain that you feel as though you can do it, but nature just puts you back in your place. I can understand the idea of them finding them just of hypothermia, trying to survive by a fire pit somewhere, and all of them in a clan just, died of hypothermia. But that is not how these bodies were found, and that's the strange part of it. So they set up camp in this area, and the way that the story goes from here on out is the pieces of evidence that were found by the military and by the police within Russia, by the family members even, that actually went there themselves to look for their loved ones. This is all based on the evidence that they found and trying to put the story together. But it just gets so complicated that none of the none of the stories are fitting correctly like a beautifully pieced puzzle. So, could you have information, Lucy, on the way that the tent was found?
Yeah. The tent, when the investigators got to the area, the first time they saw the tent, they saw it, but it was partially collapsed. The canvas had fallen. So they go in and they look inside the tent. Everything is organized as if they were just getting ready to either have dinner or to settle down for the night. Everything is organized. There was food out on the table. Everything was in place. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Like if someone had to rush out and if there was some kind of incident, nothing was knocked over. Nothing was fallen to the side. Everything was organized and it was in place. Now, on one side of the tent, which they didn't notice at first, there were rips in the tent. So they assumed that these rips were made from the outside. And when they investigated the rips,
right?
No. At first they thought it was from the outside. They thought someone had come in from the outside. The rips they were very precise. They were definitely made with some kind of knife. So the first theory that they had was somebody had come from the outside and attacked them. One of the rips was long enough that a person could get through it. It wasn't until later on in the investigation that they actually realized that the rips were made from the inside. When the investigators first looked at it, they assumed that they were cut from the outside, but they were actually cut from the inside, and they were definitely made with a knife.
And we'll get into theories, and one of which is an avalanche that could have created the hysteria where they had to leave. But as you can see, just by noting the evidence, as Lucy was just describing, the way that the tent was found, there was nothing that would have indicated an avalanche. There was nothing that would have indicated that there was a force that came over this tent, or they may have heard an avalanche coming and needed to get out in a quickness, and then the avalanche came and tore their tent apart. And even if an avalanche, let's just say an avalanche did come down their way, but missed their tent area, that still does not, in any way possible, confirm the way that they died, because the tent then is still intact, but the bodies are, and we'll get into their autopsy report, the bodies, all of them, have these mysterious marks and removals of them that just doesn't constitute the idea that an avalanche, first of all, could do that, or anything of that nature. So to me, that theory is out the window. Right off the bat, that's out the window. Why don't we get into, Lucy, I think this is the best way to sort of describe everything, is talking about the autopsy report, and we can talk about the bodies. So if do you have the autopsy report or no, Lucy?
I don't have the autopsy report, but I have how the descriptions of how the bodies were found.
Okay. So let's just go one by one. Tell us about how the bodies were found. Do you have just an outline of where they were found in proximity to the tent?
Let's see. The tent was found on February 27th, 1959. It was collapsed and no bodies were found inside of it. Now, 20 yards away, there were multiple sets of footprints that had been preserved in the snow. Some prints were smaller than others. The investigators determined there were only 9 sets of footprints, extending almost half a mile away towards the river valley. Half a mile away from the campsite, they found a cedar tree with charred boughs at the bottom. They find what looks like traces of a fire pit, and the investigators determined that this fire burned for about 2 hours. Now, just north of the spot of the tree, they found something sticking out of the snow. They saw a human knee sticking out of the snow. There's 2 men lying side by side under the snow. They have no jackets on, no pants. One has a shirt and swim trunks under long underwear. Only the right leg of the long underwear was remaining. The other leg was torn away. His feet were bare. The other body had a shirt, long underwear, and socks. Neither one had shoes. Their clothes were shredded, leaving their skin exposed. One body was face down in the snow with his arms folded under his head like a pillow. The other one is on his back with the face turned upward, and the eyes and mouth appeared to have been eaten by an animal or a bird. There were broken cedar branches all around them. Now, these 2 bodies were Georgy Krivonenko and Yuri Doroshenko. The broken branches appeared to be from Doroshenko climbing up into the tree and falling. His injuries were consistent with this. There's evidence of firewood and twigs being gathered. Okay, so these are the first 2. Now, Ludmila was found with her tongue missing. Another body that was found near Georgy and Yuri is the body of Igor Dyatlov. He was found under the snow with his arms held across his chest in a defensive pose. He only had on a sweater, a fur vest, and ski pants. He had no hat on, no gloves, or no shoes. He's wearing a watch, too, and that watch stopped at 5:31. Now, this is right near the campsite. Now, if you go farther up the slope, because all of this is happening on the slope of the mountain, on the eastern side, if you go farther up the slope, Zina was found under the snow. Now, she was lying on her right side, face down. Her face was covered with dried blood, and her right leg is bent as if she was collapsing. She was wearing a hat, ski jacket, and ski pants, but she only has on socks and no shoes. Now, those are the first bodies that were found. They didn't find all the bodies at once. So that was the first day of the investigation. Now, it wasn't until March 5th that they found another body. Rustem Slobodin was lying face down with his right leg bent underneath him. His right fist is pulled into his chest. Now, he's wearing only a shirt, ski cap, ski sweater, pants, and socks, and he had on one felt shoe, kind of like the little felt insert that you put inside a boot. Yeah. He was facing towards the tent, and the investigators thought like maybe he was trying to get back to the tent. Now, there was snow encrusted near his nose and mouth from his breathing. So he appeared that he was alive for a time after he fell. The front of his head was deeply discolored as if he sustained a blunt force to the head. Now, they kept searching, didn't find any other bodies until May 3rd. Now, there's a ravine near the burned cedar tree. They first found articles of clothing. They didn't find the bodies right away. They found clothing that looked like they had been cut or shredded. They found a vest, a right trouser leg, and a bandage. The next day, on May 4th, they find more clothing. They find pants with the right leg missing and half a woman's sweater. Now they find 4 bodies in this ravine. Ludmila is the only one that they can identify. At this point, they think that the elements had helped, decompose the bodies. She was only wearing a cap. She had on 2 sweaters, a ski pants, and 2 socks on one foot. Her other foot is wrapped in a torn sweater. Now, one of the men's faces is decomposed from the water that had was in that ravine. He's wearing a sweater and 2 watches. 2 of the men are holding each other as if they were trying to keep warm. Let's see. They did, well, I've got a little bit about the autopsies on the last 4 bodies. They did autopsies on the last 4 bodies. Alexander Kolatov had more clothes on than anyone else, but he still had no shoes on. They found nothing unusual. They said he died of hypothermia. Sasha Zolotarov, the older man, had a lot of clothes on also, but he didn't have any shoes on. Now, he had 5 fractured ribs with which caused internal bleeding. The fractures were determined to be caused by a large force while the victim had been alive. Now, Nikolai Thibodeau Brigones had fractures to his head and had died of what they called impressed fracture of the skull dome and base with abundant hemorrhage. Ludmilla had sustained massive thoracic damage, which had internal hemorrhaging, including her right heart ventricle, plus 9 fractures to her ribs. She is the one that her tongue was missing.
And in addition to that, she also had her eyes missing. Her eyes were gouged out.
Okay, yeah. Now, see, the eyes, the investigators, they did think that they were done by animals, like birds, after the bodies had been there.
It could be true. I'm not going to say it's not true or not, but I think the investigators would have known or would have noted that it would have been pecking from birds, and they would have put that on the autopsy report. This seemed as though that they were gouged out. They were missing. They weren't pecked out by any kind of animal or bird, or it didn't seem that way. Plus, the tongue was ripped out. I mean, this is. I mean, if an animal were to come by a dead body in a field somewhere or in a snowfield somewhere, I don't think they would have taken that extra precision, like a surgeon, to remove eyeballs and a tongue. They would have just, gnawed off an arm or went after a leg and the thigh. That's basically where the meaty parts are. That's what they would be looking for. It just seems odd that they would have wanted to go for the eyes or, the tongue if it was anything of an animal in relation.
One other thing that this autopsy found, their organs revealed the presence of a radioactive substance called potassium-40.
There were two members that their clothing as well had not high levels, but pretty fair moderate levels of radiation on them.
The levels that were found in the clothing were only 1 to 2 times greater. Now, some of that clothing was sent to the United States to be analyzed, actually in the University of Chicago. And what they determined that if it was something like, a weapon or a nuclear bomb, they would have expected that clothing to contain 50 to 100 times higher level of radioactivity. But the clothes that they found only had 1 to 2 times greater. I mean, it was unusual, but it really wasn't something that they said that was out of the ordinary, that it could have been something from the environment. Because at the time...
what could have been in the environment? What could have been in the environment?
Prior to this, there was some testing. There was some nuclear testing north of this. And I believe the radiation detected on the hikers' clothes led to the idea that some kind of weapon could have exploded above or near the campsite and forced them from the tent. Their clothes tested 2 to 3 times higher than normal for radiation. Now, the radiation that was found could be explained by environmental contaminants. There were nuclear tests that winter on the islands of Novaya Zemlya, which was about 850 miles north of the hikers' location. The one thing I failed to mention, too, the skin of the hikers had turned dark. It had turned, some described it as orange. Yeah, some described it as could be tan.
But there's a theory on that because there were a few members and few hikers that had that discoloration or that orangey color tint to their skin. some experts are saying that because of the exposure while laying in that snow, the exposure to the sun rays may have damaged their skin or burnt their skin, basically, because you're basically sunbathing, and when you've got white snow around you, the reflection off of that white snow is even greater than you are, just on grassland. I mean, a lot of people go to white beach sands and they get great tans. It's because of that white color that reflects so much of that sun rays that may have discolored it. So there is a discrepancy, or there's a disagreement amongst a lot of people whether or not that was possibly caused by some radiation, or it may have been sun damage that was caused while they were laying there dead in the snow.
Okay, one thing. Okay, we mentioned him before, Donnie Icar, and he's the gentleman that wrote that book. The one that actually talked to Yuri. He also had an interview with Igor's little sister, Titania, Dyatlova, and he was able to speak with her. And she told him that she felt that Igor did not die from the snow. There were open caskets at the funeral, and the skin of the hikers was very dark. Now, the first 4 hikers had open caskets when they had their funeral. She told him that when people are freezing and cold, the color of their face is not so dark. All of the bodies had brown skin on their faces and hands. Igor was only 23 years old. She said he looked like an old man. His hair had turned white. And the only way that the family was able to identify Igor is that from a gap in the front of his teeth. His sister has the same gap. That's the only way that they could identify him, because he did not look like himself.
Well, I'm not a forensics expert at all. I can't tell what's what and why it is. I don't know why some of them had white hair, why they would have had, darker tinted skin. But putting that aside, I just want to put those things aside and talk more about, these injuries. You mentioned about the 2 hikers that were found by the tree. There were marks on their feet, burn marks, which, later they've realized that basically they were trying to put their feet closer to the fire so that they could get warmer. And with hypothermia setting in, they didn't realize, their threshold for pain was much greater. So they weren't feeling the heat. They weren't feeling the fire actually hitting their feet. And that was the cause that was one of the side effects of hypothermia, is that you don't feel the pain. You sort of get this numb feeling. But these 2 hikers were found near the tree, and they've got injuries to their hands and arms and legs that determined that they tried to climb that tree. And you had mentioned that there were broken limbs that were found around them, and injuries that were consistent on their fingers, on their forearms, and on the insides of their legs, as though they were trying to climb that tree. My question is, why? Well, I understand, you and I had this conversation before the show tonight about, maybe you had mentioned that maybe it was, a lookout of some sort, or trying to see further?
Because Doroshenko is the one that they determined he climbed the tree. And for some reason, he must have fell from the tree, because his injuries are consistent with falling out of the tree and the branches. But another thing, aside from those injuries, the investigators looked at the fire, They said that it only burned for 2 hours, but there's evidence that there were twigs and firewood that was gathered. The question that the investigators had was, why would you gather firewood and twigs and let a fire go out? I mean, unless they were so severely injured that they couldn't do this. But the fire only burned for 2 hours. And
well, they could have been. It all depends, because they could have been out. Here's the theory: if there was still this huge storm and you can't see anything, if you can't see your hand in front of your face because of the wind and snow that's coming down, I can see getting disoriented. I don't know the reason why they would have left the camp. Their warm and cozy, comfy camp. I don't know the reason why they slashed through that to try and get out. It had to be in a hurry for something, I have no idea what, which we'll try to get into a little bit. But if they left the camp and traveled to get away from whatever it was that they were trying to get away during the snowstorm, they couldn't see where they were going. They got lost. They must have probably walked around in circles. That's when the hypothermia sets in. Now, you're negative 15, negative 20 degrees. That's going to set in pretty fast. It's within hours. This is, they died, the autopsy report says that they died within about 6 or 7 hours from when they left the campsite area. So this all happened very quickly. This is not they were out for a day or completely overnight or anything like that. This happened within hours. So if they were stranded out there trying to find their way, hypothermia setting in, they may have found finally a tree where they can make a fire, but already hypothermia set in. You're already hallucinating. Your brain is not functioning correctly. So, their thought perception of, do I need to keep getting sticks for fire to keep it going? Or, what is a stick even? Who knows what they were thinking? That may have caused it. But if you are at the point, here's the question. If you're at the point where you're able to make fire and sit around a campfire and try and get warm, obviously the storm is not so bad then. So then my question is, if the storm subsided at that point to the point where they can actually have an open flame, why couldn't they just walk back, whatever it was, the 300 feet, back to their campsite? Why couldn't they go?
Well, there's two things here. Okay, Doroshenko's climbing the tree. Now, the one thing that I thought is if Doroshenko climbed the tree, maybe he's trying to see what's going on back at the campsite. One of the other bodies is found where it looks like he's facing the campsite. He's not running away. He's facing the campsite, and it's like he's trying to get back there. So could they have run from the campsite, whatever happened there, and then if the storm subsided or they some time has passed, now all of a sudden they're trying to go back? Did something actually happen at that campsite rather than in the ravine where they fell? Because the bodies are found at the bottom of a ravine, as if they fell.
I'm just curious, and I'll pose this question to everybody that's in chat now, and to you, Lucy, as well. If you're in a situation, let's just say you're camping, right? And you're in the woods somewhere in Pennsylvania or something like that, right? You hear what could be a bear outside your tent right now. You may even see the shadow through your tent. You're going to run out, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to sit in the tent. You're going to run out. Now, you're with, let's just say, me and, maybe 2 other friends, okay? We're in this one tent. We see a bear. We all go, holy shit, let's get the hell out of here. We get out of the tent. Are we going to scatter and go in different directions, or are we all going to be together while we're running, or try to be together and run out of there?
Most likely you're going to try to stay together.
That's my guess. I don't know if I'm wrong in saying that, and I don't know if people who are in chat right now, if you want to offer your opinion on it, but I would think I would try and run with the group that I'm with and try and stay with the group that I'm with. I wouldn't run off on my own, or I wouldn't run off with one other person and go in a different direction. I'd try and stay together. Now, the theory also, too, with a situation like that is when you're crazed and it's chaotic, you're just running to save your life. You don't care where you're going. You just want to get away from that spot. And so I get that situation as well. The point is I'm trying to go back to the original where this all happened, and that's the tent. And if there are footprints that are in the snow, and the investigators found that those were the 9 footprints of the hikers, no other footprints, what could have initiated them to leave that tent in such a hurry if, to me, I've already determined that an avalanche did not do anything, unless it was possibly the noise of an avalanche that may have happened nearby, but investigators never put that into a report that said that there was an avalanche that happened nearby where they could have heard it. So my question is, what are the possibilities or what are the conspiracy theories of why they left that tent to begin with?
Well, first off, it couldn't be an avalanche because the tent pretty much was intact. It had collapsed partially. It wasn't if it was an avalanche, that tent would have been buried. The contents of the inside would have been all over the place. Now,
that tent would have been pushed. That tent would have been pushed 500, 1,000 feet.
Gone.
Right.
Now, the other part, if it's an animal, when they were looking at the prints that are around there, the only footprints that they found that were preserved from the cold were those of the hikers. There were only 9 sets. There were no evidence of animal prints. There was no, if you got a bear that's out there, wouldn't you think that maybe you would have seen some kind of bear print? A bear is huge. You would have found evidence of animals. And a bear is not going to take, I'm assuming that, everything I know about bears, if they're looking for food or something like that, if people were inside that tent, that bear would have gone and tried, that tent, something would have happened to it. It either would have been destroyed or it would have been ripped open much more than with a knife.
You also have to take into consideration, too, who's investigating this. And this is the Russian military, the Soviet Union, basically, at that time. It's the Soviet military at the time. And everything was highly, highly classified and covered up. What they released to their own people was probably even far worse what they released to the world itself. So I can't trust the investigation itself. Simply also, too, because they actually closed off this area for 3 years after this incident. For 3 years, no one can go in this area. Why? I could understand months because of the investigation, but 3 years? Why would they close this off? What are they trying to cover up, or what did they try to cover up? And what's being left out of this investigation report that we need to know about in order to put these dots together? I think that's the reason why none of this makes sense, and why we're finding that people have so many different conspiracy theories, even down to UFO abductions or UFO interactions with them, is because nothing seems to make sense, from their injuries to the way that they traveled to how they were found. It just doesn't add up. And there are definitely pieces that are missing. And one of the things, if you guys remember, when I mentioned the description of some of them, one of the hikers was meticulous in all of his expeditions for writing journals about everything that he did every single day. And this particular hiker, his notes were never found. But yet another member's notes were found, and which had descriptions, Dyatlov's notes, which were descriptions of basically when they woke up, who woke them up, what they ate, and where they traveled, and that's basically it. So there's a big, huge question mark over the whole thing. This guy has notes. What does it say? What is on it? What are they trying to hide? That, I think, is where we need to get into and question more of, because I think that's where the answers are going to lie.
Well, okay, 1959, they're in the middle of the Cold War, okay? Obviously, there's a lot of secret testing going on. Obviously, I'm assuming that it would be like weapons testing. It would be different kinds of things like that. If, let's say, the Russians were doing some kind of weapons testing in the area, something goes wrong, that's a major reason why this could have been hidden. They're not going to release all of this if it were pointing towards something that they were doing that they shouldn't have been. Could these hikers have stumbled onto something, saw something that they shouldn't have seen?
Well, one, wouldn't it have been cautioned off? Wouldn't this area have been cautioned off if it was a military testing area?
Not necessarily, because the mountain area where they were was pretty much deserted anyway. You've got the Mansi people that live in the area. They called it Dead Mountain because the mountain itself is described as nothing growing there. There's no it's not like land where, you could have animals of any kind. It was completely deserted. So for them to go to this area, I can understand that Igor, really wanted adventure. Okay, he really wanted something dangerous. So the plot that, the path that he plotted would be in this area. if there was something secret going on, I don't think they would have known about it.
There's
Even
also
the locals, when they stopped when they stopped before they got there, the locals really didn't warn them. The only person that warned them about going there was the local forester. And the only reason why he warned them about going into this area was because of the high winds and weather. He never mentioned anything else about, you shouldn't go there, it's bad. It was only because of the weather.
Right, and wouldn't he know? Wouldn't these locals know that that's a testing site?
I'm assuming they would. I mean, if there's something that big is going on, the locals would have known something. They would have felt something. Something would have happened. You can't test the nuclear weapon without somebody finding out. There would have been levels of radiation within the little hamlet that they stopped. They even stopped, in the name of that town where there's children. There's nothing that points towards any kind of radiation affecting those local people.
Now, also, too, there is a report that there were other hikers, not close by, but I'd say, miles away, that had noted these orange glowing orbs in the sky. And that's what's leading conspiracy theorists to think a couple of different things. One, to what we were just talking about, alluding to the fact that there was possibly some sort of military testing and that those were missiles in the sky and the reactions of these missiles in the sky. Another theory, conspiracy theory, is the idea that these orbs are possibly UFOs. And that is probably what happened. And the aliens, the idea basically of this theory is that these aliens or extraterrestrials came down and did, medical testing, and that's why you have her tongue out and the eyes are gouged out. These are pieces. You've always heard the stories about, cows have been mutilated, but so precisely mutilated where tongues have been cut out or they've been opened up like a surgeon and an organ removed. So people have thought of this, but I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm thinking, okay, what else could be the possibility of these orange glowing orbs in the sky? And I thought of, okay, when you're out camping, hiking, you do bring emergency supplies with you, not only just food, but you bring emergency supplies. If you are in distress, you bring a flare. And so the idea and the thought that I had was, did they sound off a flare in the night sky because they were distressed? And this is what those glowing orange orbs are that these hikers saw, but never realized that they were not alone, number one, in the woods, in the mountain area, and that they could have been a flare stress call. And so my thought is in thinking that they were cognitive about what was going on with them. It wasn't that they were just willy-nilly running around the place trying to find a way away from whatever was causing this distress or chaos, and that was it. I think that there may have been some, before leaving that tent, somebody may have grabbed a few things, and this may have been one of them. I don't know. And so therefore, if the Russian military are trying to cover up, they would not have documented finding a flare, an empty flare, next to one of the bodies. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. I don't know.
Well, there's one thing that's curious about it. You got Igor that has studied, radio technology, and he's building these shortwave radios. Why didn't he take a radio with him? This is one trip he didn't take a radio. They were big, they were cumbersome, and they said that, well, he didn't want to take it because he didn't want to overload what they were carrying. But you're going into a deserted area. Why didn't he take a shortwave radio with him? Also, too, when you're talking about these orbs, the investigators themselves that were searching for the body reported seeing a strange celestial phenomena. This was on February 17th. While they were doing their search, they saw a large light spot in the sky. The spot grew bigger, and a star appeared in the center. The light moved from northeast to southwest and then down. Other people in the area have reported seeing bright lights, what they call a rocket, in the north sky. They also heard thunder. There have been other reports of rockets being seen from the beginning of early to mid-February. This is after the hikers had taken off at the end of January. One event lasted from 8 to 15 minutes in the sky. Now, one of the official Soviet investigators, his name was Lev Ivanov. He believed the orb sightings in 1959 were connected to the deaths. He told a journalist that while he could not say that the orbs were weapons, he called them energy bundles unexplained by modern science. Now, privately, he told a journalist that he believed that they were killed by aliens in a UFO, which, by saying that, of course, maybe he is trying to cover something up. I mean, we're talking about the Russians. At that time, they weren't going to give up any of their secrets. They weren't going to give up any information about anything that they had done. So the hikers weren't only the ones. Now, one of the things, they all took pictures. They took a lot of pictures, and if you go online, you can see these. There is one last picture on Georgie's camera, and the image is dark, as if it was shot at night, but it has a light to one side of the frame. You can actually see like a moving orb. This is the last photo that he took. So is this one of those glowing orbs that was in the area? Is that what was coming towards them? Is that what they were running from?
There's also, which is kind of hilarious, I don't know if it's true or not, there's also another photograph that's running online that I noticed. It's a picture of one of the hikers, I can't remember who, inside the tent. And he's sitting on a chair. And we're not talking about a tent where, it's basically all you get in is a sleeping bag and a light and a radio. It's a big tent. It's a good-sized tent where you can have a table and chairs and room to lay out and sleep down on. So there's this one picture that's online right now, and maybe I'll try and see if I can find it again and post it on our Facebook page. But there's this one picture of one of the hikers sitting on a chair, and to the left of the gentleman that's sitting on the hiker that's sitting on the chair, from around, I don't know what this structure is that is inside the tent. I don't know if it's a bed, if it's a box of something or what, but there's a claim that there's actually a person's head that's coming around it, facing the camera, that is no depiction of any other hiker that's on there. And they're saying that there may have been somebody that was hiding inside this tent that possibly could have attacked them, and that's why they ran out. Well, I don't know if this is true or not.
There's another theory of armed men. Now, we're talking about, there were these gulags that were in different parts of Russia, prison camps. And there is a theory that armed men, either Soviet military or escaped prisoners, rounded up the hikers and led them to where the bodies were found and killed them. And they came up with that theory because of the slashes in the tent. But there were no reports of escapes from prison camps at that time, and the closest prison camp to this area was 50 miles away.
I don't know. Just to give you also to a sense of the Russian military and the government there, I don't know if anybody has ever heard of this weird radio transmission that's called UVB-76. And I posed out actually that question if he's still in chat, if Red is still in chat. If you've ever heard of, because he's heard of everything, UVB-76, it's this crazy weird radio transmission that has been coming from Russia since the early 70s, I believe, or mid-70s or something like that. And basically there's no music, there's nothing being transmitted. It's this weird sounding noise that is repeatedly been popping through. And it hasn't, in just to give the story in short form, basically, when it was noted and people found out about this transmission, somebody had decoded where this transmission was coming from, found the spot, and I'm assuming that the Russian government realized that they were uncovered, stopped transmitting from this one location, and moved it to another location. I'm not sure if they moved 2 times or just 1 time, but when these folks went to Russia, to the area, I think it was like south of Moscow somewhere, when they finally found this location, they found an empty building or some sort of area with documents pertaining to this broadcast. I'm not too sure about the particulars of what was on these papers, but it was of military coding, military language, and all of that stuff. And so now the Russians have gotten smart, and they're able to sort of remotely have this transmission done in 3 different locations or 4 different locations, so you can never know where it's actually coming from. You can't hone in on it. But for a long period of time, there's always been this repetitive beeping weird noise that's been going on. But recently, within, I'd say, I don't know, if it's the last 10 years or so, people have been finding out that if you listen to this transmission long enough, you can actually hear people talking. People have say they've experienced and witnessed a woman screaming, a man yelling. It's almost as if there's this, microphone set in this room somewhere where they're broadcasting some sort of mixed signal out there, but this microphone is catching the ambient noise that's coming from the room. It's just a very weird transmission. And a lot of people also too say that they're holding this transmission in case of an emergency that they need to broadcast something. So that's the reason why that they have a lock on it. And this is from the military itself. So here we have got just a strange, strange thing, transmission, military project that's coming from Russia, has to do with radio from the 70s. Many of the members within this group of hikers had radio broadcasting and radio engineering backgrounds, so the link to military could be there as well with them, as well as the other members who supposedly actually have been part of the military and are actually claiming that 2 of the members are actually part of the KGB. So could there have been some sort of inside destruction of this group? Could 1 or 2 or more members led these hikers up there for some reason or another, because maybe somebody knew too much, or somebody had information about something, or somebody knew something? One of the women that was there was known to have a big mouth and opinionated. Did she know things that she wasn't supposed to know and was maybe going to reveal something and these people knew about it? Did that one gentleman, that one hiker, who was supposed to actually go on a hike with another group and landed on Dyatlov's group, who was the oldest one out of all of them? He was 37 years old. Everybody else was in their young 20s, early 20s. That's sort of strange and odd for this 37-year-old man to be on a hiking expedition with such a young group like this. Was he somehow planted there and made up this whole story to be there to assist with some sort of internal destruction or some secret project to lead these people out to this wilderness area and basically kill them and make it seem as though that it was them. Now, that wouldn't attest to why the people that I'm accusing of them leading out there died as well. So there goes sort of that theory. But then again, they could have met up with the Russian military, who then, this is going to get confusing, but who would have killed them as well because they were involved in it and they're on the low totem pole of this whole thing. I know that's a huge stretch, but with the Russian military, I don't put anything past them. They are so stealth in the way that they operate. I mean, just turn on CNN and Fox News right now. You can listen to what they're doing. It's just another theory that I'm sort of putting together in my head as I was reading this story about a self-internal destruction with this group. There's another theory also, too, about a self-internal destruction that has to do with sex and jealousy. And yeah.
Well, I just want to say something. I just looked up the UBV76, and it's a shortwave radio broadcast that has been broadcasting since the 70s.
Right.
It is a piercing, buzzing noise that has continued incessantly for months. And then a cold
and you can
voice
just to interrupt you for a second, you can actually still listen to that right now. So you can go
it's
Google
still going
this.
On.
Yeah, it's still going on. So you guys can actually Google UVB-76, and you can listen to this transmission for yourself.
Well, UBV76 is read out in a thick Russian accent before listing a series of code words and numbers. And then just as suddenly it ends, the buzzing returns for another few months.
That was in the early stages of when they had it broadcasting. Now it's sort of like this weird, I don't know, digital sound that comes through. But as people listen to it now, they're catching voices in the background sometimes. You know, before it was sort of like maybe once or twice a year. Now people are claiming that they're actually recording it, and they're posting it as evidence that it's happening almost once a month now. They're hearing more and more of it happening.
25 times today, 25 times every minute. It spends less than a second buzzing, it pauses, and then buzzes endlessly.
Right, the buzzing happens endlessly, but what I'm talking about is the actual voices that people are hearing at least once a month.
But see, this is from the 70s, and this incident happened in 1959.
No, I know, I understand that, but you know, I don't know nobody knows what was happening prior to this. So as they were changing these radio transmissions from the 70s on, they could have had something going on prior to this before because of the war. You know, because of the Cold War and everything that was going on. But as I was talking about the sex and jealousy portion of this whole thing, you know, you had the two women in there. There were two men that actually had dated them, boyfriend and girlfriend, and then broke up shortly before this expedition. Then you bring on more men into this group that, who knows, could possibly have been attracted to them, you know, maybe, you know, tried some advances with them. The former boyfriends that are still there were jealous, didn't like it, and, you know, just started to go nuts and crazy. One of them actually had and is known for a volatile temper, and a lot of people had been afraid of him. He had exerted this, and people experienced this as they were interviewing people and family and friends and such, that he had this horrible temper even back at home with friends and other people that he came in contact with, even within school. And he's been in trouble many, many times because of his temper. And so coupled with the cold and coupled with camping out and with this whole, you know, dating and you know, not a boyfriend anymore with others. Maybe he may have wanted to get together with someone or didn't, or who knows. But that's one of the theories that's out there. One of actually, Yuri Yudin actually admitted that one of the male members of the group had a crush on Zena, but he was sort of ashamed at actually being interested in this person. And this is the information that he had gathered prior to, obviously, because this is Yuri Yudin who got sick and left the group before anything ever happened. So this was possibly even stirring before they even went out on their first steps on this mountain. I mean, it's a plausible case. He could have gone crazy in the camp itself and chased everybody out and that's why they all scattered around. And because of, and I can't remember the one woman who had her tongue taken out. Maybe he just went Zena. When Zena, when she had her tongue taken out and her eyes gouged out, maybe he just went crazy. Maybe she was going to say something about someone about that. Maybe he liked the other woman, or was saying crap about him, and just ticking him off. I don't know. There's a lot of things that are plausible in this whole situation, and I kind of find that a little bit credible.
But in addition, they kept a group diary. The girls also kept their own personal diaries. And actually, we're talking 1959. So most of the members of this group, it is said that they were virgins. There was a lot of talk of love and romance, but it was all innocent. It was flirtation. And Yuri did admit it that the male members had a crush on Zena. And the group diary has only one entry that refers to something like this, and it mentions a dispute about love provoked by Z. Kolmogorova.
Yeah, Zenaida.
By Zena. So, I'm not so convinced of that. I mean, I'm thinking of the time. It's 1959. I don't really think that maybe. My impression of Zena is that she's outspoken. She probably was a flirt. But again, it's 1959. I don't think that their morals were kind of like the way they are now. I don't think that was the case. Now, even then, let's say that something had happened like that. There was no alcohol on this trip. They didn't drink. They weren't drinkers. The only alcohol that was on the trip, they took some medicinal alcohol, and it was a small amount. Two of the investigators confessed that they found that alcohol and drank it while they were searching for the bodies. So I'm not so convinced that it was like a jealous rage.
Well, you don't need alcohol to have jealousy and rage.
I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that theory. I just don't think that's it.
No, I'm not saying that that's it either. I'm just saying it's a plausible theory that could be. I think it's more so than a UFO interaction. I think it's more so than the avalanche theory. I think it's more so than the Mansi fight. If the local Mansi tribe members came there and wanted to claim their land and shoot them off and chase them off, you don't have any other footprints of that. And I don't think the Russians would have hid that the Mansi tribes held it. The Mansi tribe did this because they didn't care about the Mansi tribe. They really didn't. Whether or not they lived or died, they didn't care about them. So if they believed the Mansi tribe did this, they would have stated it.
Oh, they would have annihilated them. But see, with the jealousy thing, you would think that if some kind of disagreement happened and one guy all of a sudden went crazy, wouldn't the other male hikers have tried to stop him?
Yes. But do you notice on many of the men, their injuries are in a line with defense. So they've got a lot of bruising on their forearms and on their hands, as though they were trying to fight something, or as though they were in a fight.
The extent of their injuries, the crushed ribs, the blunt head to the skull being crushed. I don't think that one guy would have been able to do that. This is more than one man.
No, I know, but wait. The crushed ribs, though, is another thing that's a little bit more mysterious, because the crushed ribs were compared to being in a car accident. That's how bad these ribs were crushed.
Yeah,
and they were crushed
in
a right, exactly, and they were crushed in a vertical line, straight vertical line. But, and I don't know if it was one or two of the hikers that had these crushed ribs, there is no bruising on their skin. There's no superficial wound, exterior wound on their body. If you got punched in the chest, if you got hit with, say, a tree branch in a fight, you'd have a huge bruise on your chest plus broken ribs. these hikers did not have anything on their chest, did not have anything on their skin, but their ribs were broken. That's another mystery that people are talking about an implosion possibly under snow, and the gravity and the force of the snow may have slowly compacted their body to be able to then break the ribs, but not do any huge damage or any superficial injury or damage to their skin. But they weren't, there's, I think, about 5 or 6 feet of snow was the highest amount of snow on one of the victims. That's not enough to make a crushing blow to your chest. So I understand about the idea of it maybe not being an internal destruction, because that whole portion of their ribs being broken, but there's no superficial wound, does not make sense. How did that happen? It did not happen in a fight.
Plus the internal bleeding. For internal bleeding, yeah, maybe it came from the ribs, but there had to be something of such force to crack their ribs. And how does that happen without bruising on the outside? If you're in a car wreck, you're going to have external injuries. How could something have hit them so hard that it's not going to affect the outside body and not leave marks?
Well, Kelly made a good point, and I can't always remember saying her name.
K.O.
Said that K.O. Sorry. That there may have been restricted blood flow because of the flow, which actually does make sense. So if hypothermia is on the onset here, not even on the onset, excuse me, but more of sort of like 2/3 of the way to their death, that the constriction of the blood vessels in their body has been slowed down tremendously. And so blood flow may not have been running through the areas where they may have been exposed to the cold. And so therefore, there wouldn't have been any blockage, there wouldn't have been any bruising, because no blood is actually, or very little blood is flowing in that area itself. That kind of makes sense. And so I don't know what to make of it, but still, it's just weird that these ribs were broken that way. From what?
Okay, and let's say that there's some major fight going on. Wouldn't you think that if there's some major fight, why would they rush out without shoes on? Why would they rip the tent open to get out? Wouldn't you just go through the front? It's that rip in the tent where somebody tried to go out through the back of the tent. That's telling me that they're in such a panic that they are trying to escape.
Right,
that's not from a fight.
But they also had firearms on them, and those were found in the tent. So it's kind of strange, too, that if there was anything that was life-threatening, why didn't they take that with them? Or why wasn't that in their hand if they had to get out of the tent for some reason? I'm assuming enough so that they had to cut the tent to get out. What was blocking, first of all, the entrance of this tent? But the trauma that was going on, enough for them to cut this tent open. If I was there, I'd grab a weapon. That's the first thing I would do. I'd be scared out of my wits.
I would put my shoes on. If I got to go out there and break up a fight between some guys, I'm going to put my boots on. I
don't think you'd have time to put your shoes on. In a situation like that,
if you've got a major fight where two guys are going, if it's only humans fighting each other, I'm going to put my shoes on before I go out there and try to break them up. I'm not going to rush out in my bare feet.
But what if he's actually going crazy on everyone? What if he's just like wielding?
I'm going to put my boots on because I got to get away from him.
You are not going to put your boots on. If I come after you with a knife right now, if I was there in that room with you, you're going to stop and say, "Wait a minute, Anthony, let me put my shoes on first, then chase me outside."
I don't wear shoes. I don't wear shoes anyway, so.
Yeah, I know you don't wear shoes. You're Indian. Why don't you, the other thing that was kind of strange to hear this, because I've never heard this, one of the other conspiracy theories that you mentioned to me right before we went on air, Lucy. I don't know if it's plausible. There are a lot of experts that have discounted this one, in particular, but why don't you read it and let's just see, what other people think about it.
Okay. This one is it has to do with infrasound and something that's called a Kármán vortex street. And basically, when we talk about infrasound, it's referred to as low-frequency sound. It's sound that's lower in frequency than 20 hertz or cycles per second. And what it does, your hearing becomes gradually less sensitive as the frequency decreases. So for humans to perceive infrasound, the sound pressure must be high. There is a Hungarian physicist, and his name is Theodor von Kármán. And he tried to figure out why certain things like airplane wings, bridge supports, buildings would suddenly and spontaneously begin to vibrate. The vibrate, once it started, would often amp up and up until the entire structure would spin out of control or fall apart. Now, what it is that it's like very, very strong wind, and it usually is coming from two sides. It hits something huge, like something that's smooth. When the air hits from either side, air vortices or small tornadoes are created when wind of a certain speed hits a blunt object of a particular shape and size. Geographic masses around the world are known to cause this particular pattern of vortices. When the vortices are large, they can reach the destruction threshold of a tornado. And the example that they use is when the strong winds hit the Rock of Gibraltar. The powerful vortices spinning off the rock are believed to be the cause of capsizing ships that are in the strait. The vortices are often accompanied by infrasonic frequencies. So there's like a big rock formation in this area, and it's called Boot Rock, and it's like this jagged rock that's huge and sticks out of the lands. Boot Rock is irregular, so that probably is not it. But investigators, you need something symmetrical and smooth in order for this to happen. The summit of the mountain is dome-shaped. Now, if this is what happened, if a Kármán vortex happened, it could have produced a roar from the wind, but nothing, it could have produced a roar from the wind. Now, the summit of the mountain is dome-shaped, so it's possible that a Kármán vortex could have occurred. The shape of the summit and its proximity to the campsite would create the ideal conditions for this phenomena. The vortices would have produced infrasound, and it would have had screaming winds outside the hiker's tent. The vortices, the hikers would have felt the vibrations on the ground, and it would be vibrating. Eventually, their chest cavities would begin to vibrate, and the effect of the infrasound would have been felt by the hikers as panic, fear. They would have had trouble breathing, and it would have been frightening enough for the hikers to run from the tent without taking their clothes and shoes. So this is one theory. Okay, now let's say this thing happens. Okay, so you're in the tent. All of a sudden, you're feeling this vibration on the ground. You're feeling this vibration in your body. You're hearing this roar outside. Of course, they panicked. They couldn't breathe. They didn't know what was going on. You know, this phenomena really wasn't defined yet. So is it possible that this is what happened to them? I mean, to me, this is the most plausible theory.
I mean, it is a stretch. It is very scientific. I could see this being as a plausible reason why. It's to me though. I can understand the idea of them rushing out of the tent because of the sound, but then why would they run further away when they're not able to see anything? You know, like, so say for instance, I hear this, you hear this sound. I understand you don't know where the hell it's coming from. You get out of the tent, You don't know where it's coming from, but you hear this sound, something roaring, something screeching. It's vibrating all over the place. You're going to look up, obviously, and sort of, bewildered and jumble all around the place trying to figure out where this thing is coming from. But at some point, even if it even goes on for an hour, I'm going to think, okay, it's not a missile, it's not a rocket, it's not a bomb, it's not a UFO, it's not anything that's imminently dangerous to me at this point. You just don't know what the hell this thing is. I'm not going to stay away from my warm tent where I have every single supply that I need to stay alive, not only to stay out of the cold, but I've got my food and I've got my weapons and I've got my clothing in there. To me, I would stay in the tent, because what good would it be to stand outside in the cold hearing this noise? I mean, they couldn't get, even if it was, say, this huge boulder rock that was going to come down on them, where the hell are they going to go? They would be dead anyway.
But see, it does say that effective infrasound causes panic, fear, they can't breathe. So could they have been confused? I'm imagining that this is a sound that is so huge, and somebody mentioned it in chat. They could have thought an avalanche was coming. So they run outside, they're feeling this vibration. I mean, when something physically affects you that bad, where you're feeling vibrations in your chest, and then they panic.
Right,
okay?
but they didn't go far. But they didn't go far. Like, they didn't continue going down the mountain. They didn't go very far at all. And I understand hypothermia and the cold and everything else, but the idea is if you're in panic mode, as an experienced hiker and a professional hiker and tourist, as they call it, you have to at some point, even with the fear of everything, you have to understand that I am not going to survive out here with one shoe and no sock on the other, and no shirt or no coat, no flashlight, no weapon, nothing with you. I'm not going to survive. So where am I going? What am I doing?
You're thinking rationally. If you're in a panic, if you
are
fearing,
I know, but I'm saying as a professional.
Panic.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is a professional hiker has been through panic modes. They understand, I'm sure they've been in life or death situations. One of the hikers was actually shot. So I can't imagine the panic that you feel when you're shot accidentally by another hiker. You were in a panic mode there as well. They had to have lived through some sort of panic and fear at some point where, not that they've trained themselves to get through it, but they can sort of recognize it and think, coherently, that I'm not going to survive out here with no sock and one shoe, and hardly any clothing, no food, no flashlight, no weapons, no coat, no shelter. I think at some point, after 4 hours, you're going to say to yourself, okay, there is no avalanche, and if there is, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well go back to the tent. I have a better, chance at living if I'm at least going to keep myself warm enough to the point where if it doesn't happen, I can get the hell out of there.
One of the hikers was found as if he was trying to get back to the tent. My thought is that if you're that panicked and that confused, it is possible to run. You're running for your life. You don't know what is happening. And could the effects of the infrasound have confused them that much? Once they got outside, you got wind, you got snow, in that state, yes, they could have gotten confused. They could have ran without thinking. Something scared them to the point where they ran without their shoes. If there is something, if you feel threatened, where you fear that your life is in danger, you're going to run.
It still doesn't give the answer to why she had her tongue and eyes removed. It still doesn't. It doesn't explain it. And so, I think many people have tackled this topic and this horrific case of these 9 hikers that died on that mountain, and they've tried to make sense of what little evidence that we were given. And there's actually a new theory that has just come about, I think, within the last 6 to 9 months or so. There's a gentleman here in the States, I can't remember which state he lives in, resides in, but he's actually been studying this for a very long time, and in his research, he's concluded that another possibility could be that they were actually murdered by miners in the area. Now, mining in the Russian mountains during the time of 1959 was illegal, and the Ural Mountains is prosperous. It is, there are huge amounts of diamonds and gold and so many different minerals and ore that you can think of is all over the Ural Mountains, and it is an area in which miners were craving to find money, finding the riches. And one theory from this guy is that there were miners in the area that were mining, and there's actually closed mines that are in the Ural Mountains area from the time period and even earlier than that. That was done by Russia themselves, but it was done the legal way. And so if you're an independent miner, you were not allowed to do this at all. And so the theory is that these hikers came across the miners in this area, unexpectedly, and obviously saw who they were, saw their faces, knew what they were doing possibly. Maybe the miners had possibly scared them out of the tent, and that may have been the reason why. They may have taken over it. The theory that he says, that this guy also says too, is that maybe that one woman who has a big mouth or is opinionated, they may have deliberately, cut her eyes out because she said, I'm going to tell, when I get back, I'm going to tell them, what you guys are doing, and cut her tongue out so she wouldn't say anything, as sort of like a sign to everybody else that was, all the other hikers that were there, and then possibly could have just decided just kill them all so that nobody was able to tell, the military or the Russian government what this group of miners were doing. Again, it's another plausible reason as to why things happened, and that could have been the reason why maybe those 2 hikers were also trying to get up the tree. They were trying to get away physically from another person that was after them, trying to kill them. And possibly the one that was trying to get back to the tent was trying to get back to the tent to get their weapons. It does make a lot more sense, this one, but there's no proof of anything about any miners being in that area at that time. Obviously, there isn't any, because if these hikers saw them, they were the only ones that did see them, and so there wouldn't have been any other evidence for anybody to see. So it's interesting to think in that manner. But again, here we have the 101th, if that's a word, 101 conspiracy theory that's out there that is trying to explain what happened because of what I believe is the Russian military cover-up of this case.
But there are no other footprints. There's only 9 sets of footprints. So if miners just tried to scare them, you're going to scare them.
They could have covered up as they walked away.
There's no evidence of that.
That's what the military says.
But why not cover up the 9 footprints?
That's what the military says.
That's what the military says. But that's a cover. To me, that's a cover-up story. The minor theory is a cover-up story for what really happened, because you only got 9 sets of footprints. You don't have there's no evidence of anything else around there. I still believe they saw something that they shouldn't have seen. And with all the lights that are in the sky and all the orbs and stuff like that, obviously something was happening. Some kind of testing, something was going on. They saw something they weren't supposed to see.
I just think that this is the most fascinating case that I have ever come across in all of my research. The most fascinating, the one that bewilders me the most, the one that I have been racking my brain trying to, you know me, I'm trying to figure out and make sense of each individual, first of all, each individual person's autopsy report compared to the surroundings and the environment. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense.
One thing else, the Mansi, the Mansi legend for the Mountain of the Dead. There was a similar incident in which 9 Mansi men were also found dead while seeking salvation from a flood during ancient times. So let's say, let's go to the totally extreme. Let's say that there is something on this mountain that is supernatural. There's maybe some kind of demon or something like that. This isn't the first time it happened. It happened to the indigenous people that were there. They have a legend about this. So is it possible that they stumbled onto some kind of supernatural demon or being? Because, how would the Mansi have a legend like this where 9 men were killed on this mountain? They call it Dead Mountain. Nothing grows there. It's completely deserted. See, the indigenous side, the Native American side of me starts thinking of that. Maybe this is some kind of dead ground that they shouldn't have been on. Maybe there's something here that we as humans don't know or understand. We're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to say, it's military, it's something else, it's aliens. But let's say, for the sake of argument, the Mansi people do believe that this mountain is dead. Could it be cursed? These are like all things that, to the indigenous people, are possibilities.
Well, just to expand on that a little bit, and we've got a few more minutes that we can talk about this case. But I did mention in the introduction to the show tonight that we not only just research the actual incident itself, but we like to sort of broaden the horizon and figure out if there are other incidents and cases out there in the world that are like this that may possibly explain things. So just expanding on what you just talked about possibly a did you say Indian curse, or was it just a tribal curse?
It could be a tribal curse.
So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Superstitious Mountain. It's a mountain range in, I believe it's in Arizona. I hope I don't misquote it. Yes, it is in Arizona. Now, the Pygmy Indians lived in this area many, many years ago. And they claim that Superstitious Mountain is basically a cursed mountain area. And they named it, well, not they named it, but they led it to lead to the name of Superstition Mountain, because of this. And many of the gold miners of the time, from 1880s on, this place, again, was another mining area for gold. And since 1880 till now, there have been approximately almost 30 odd cases of deaths in this mountain area, in this mountain range. And, I could talk about a few of them, but some of them were like where their heads were actually completely taken off of their necks and separated from their skeleton. There are many suicides that have happened. There are many people who have been murdered on this mountain. Now, I can understand it's mining town, it's a mining mountain. People are dying to get, a piece of the gold, a piece of the action, so they're going to kill one another for this. But there's many different occurrences since 1880 up until actually just recently, which I just printed out This happened in 2011. Another case that happened at around Superstitious Mountain where a plane crashed, and all of the members that were on the plane, which were 6 members of the plane, had died. And they claimed that there was some mysterious and odd occurrence that happened to this plane. It wasn't of any, not natural occurrence that the plane crashed, but there wasn't anything mechanical. They still haven't figured out what went wrong to cause this plane to crash into the Superstitious Mountain that caused these deaths. So it, just by you talking about the idea of land being cursed, and we've talked about that many, many times when we go to haunted locations, that, one of the reasons possibly could be, especially here in the States, that, the American land and fields and the ground are sacred to the Native Americans that owned it. And so, therefore, that could be the actual point at which things are disturbed, or the reason why things may be disturbed on that land later on because of either cursing or disrupting of burial grounds or sacred grounds. So could this be another case of Dyatlov Pass, that there's too much mystery surrounding it because of a tribal or Indian curse? I don't know.
Well, this is something, I just looked it up, and I guess there's a hole in the mountain or something like that, and it says some Apaches believe that this hole is leading down into the lower world, or hell, and it's located in the Superstition Mountains. Could this be the same kind of thing? Could they have stumbled on something that opens up to some kind of underworld, netherworld, whatever it is? I mean, it's totally unexplained. Nothing makes sense of this. But here you have the Apaches that have this kind of belief. You have the Mansi that believe that this mountain, they call it Dead Mountain. They don't call something Dead Mountain for just because there's nothing there. I mean, that's just a theory. And now that I've read this, I mean, it's kind of making the hamsters really running really fast up here. Could this be the same kind of thing? I mean, it's something that we don't know. We don't know what happened.
We don't know what happened, and I'm not making this as a case of possibility of cursed land, and that's the reason why. But it's interesting when you do research on a particular topic, it's always interesting then to do research and see if it's ever seen or experienced anywhere else. And when you pull up those stories and you pull up those and really review those cases, there possibly could be some instances where there are similarities that you can make a case for, or come up with new theories that may lead you in a different direction. And that goes with anything. That goes with anything within the paranormal that we've done. And so that's one of the reasons why I did this, just to, throw it out there. It's another question mark as a possibility. And Kay had mentioned also, too, that, could it be also, too, that the minerals, obviously, that are at the Dead Mountain area, as well as the minerals that are at Superstition Mountain, could possibly create a greater effect for either this curse or this power or, this possible vortex of some sort that's within there that creates that energy that's even greater, that affects anything that's living or anything that is on that land. I mean, it's an interesting thought to think of and, to do a little bit more research on. I always find that interesting to do.
Well, I'm telling you, this whole thing has opened up so many questions. And again, we do a show, and whatever questions I have in the beginning, I've got a million more. And I know we haven't touched on what really happened, and I don't know if anybody's ever really going to figure it out.
No, if we touch on, we can't even touch on what really happened because the case is not closed. Nobody has been able to definitively say what went on. Everybody has their own theory to it, and the only way that we are going to know the real answers is if the Russian really pull forward all of their case files on this and reveal what they have been they haven't been disclosing to their own people, to the families of these hikers, as well as to the world. I don't think that's ever going to happen. As much disclosure as they say that they do with the UFOs and everything else, there's a ton more of things that they Sharpie marker all over that they don't want anybody else to see. So, don't trust everything that you read.
Well, I definitely don't know what happened, but you know what? For once, I can say I don't think the aliens did it.
No, and this is funny because we do a paranormal show, and I'm sort of negating the paranormal aspects. Well, most of the paranormal aspects of it. I'm still the whole native tribal curse thing is sort of marinating in my brain right now. But other than that, I don't think there's really anything that is paranormal in nature. I don't think that there was a Bigfoot or a Yeti that came and tried to attack them. I don't think it's a UFO thing at all. I don't know what else there could be. Was it spirits of the land? I haven't heard a case for that. I don't know anything that would have frightened them that way. Demonic force? I don't know. So, for once on our paranormal show, we're not utilizing the paranormal sources.
God, we're so well-rounded.
Are we? I don't know. All right, why don't you get to... So, this was really interesting, and I hope everybody who's listening, we may have confused a lot of people. Obviously, this is a lot of research to do. There have been several people who have done movies on this, which there's a really great movie that I actually watched the other day that makes you think about it because they incorporate the real Dyatlov Pass case into this movie, but they put their own little twist to it, which is kind of interesting. So if you're ever interested in at least just watching more about it, there's this great movie, and I can't for the life of me, again, remember the name of it. That's it,
it's
The
called
Devil's
Pass. And it's directed by Rennie Harlan.
Yeah, if you get a chance, it's a great movie to watch. They do incorporate some real aspects of the case in it, but it does have some really funny, weird twist to it. There have been many books that have been written about this. Again, it's just all theories that have been put out there. But it is an interesting case for you guys to do your own research. If you think that you possibly may be interested to learn more, there's a ton of information out there. I've got 60 pages right in front of me right now that, I've maybe touched on 20 of them. There's just a lot more information out there that if you really did your due diligence and try to chronologically put things together, you may come up with a better theory. Who knows? So do some research out there. And if you have any further information on this, I'd love to hear from you. I know Lucy would too. But we would love to hear from you guys. So if there is any info that you guys have, post it on our Facebook page or send us an email at paranormal.review@aol.com. And who knows, maybe we can all come up with some sort of idea to this and figure out something. So with that said, Lucy, why don't you get to the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week?
Okay, and this week they come from YouTube land, and it is Pat Meriwether. And Pat listens to us on YouTube and left this comment for us. I just discovered you too, and you're adorable. The more you become aware of the sinks in your life, the better life becomes. I am H.O. Thanks for the show. Thank you, Pat, for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. And if you want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, just like us on Facebook.
Okay, next week. How do you explain this? A man attempts to commit suicide, but his dead father rushes back to prevent it. A woman looks into her young daughter's room and finds that the child's imaginary friend is real. Award-winning science writer and journalist Louisa Oakley Green has written a book called Sightseeing in the Undiscovered Country. The book takes you on a tour through the mystical territories of the human experience, from premonition to near-death adventures to contact with the dead. The book also highlights several recent scientific studies into consciousness, near-death experiences, and reincarnation. Louisa will be joining us next Friday night to tell us all about the things that science cannot explain, or can it? Be here and find out. Thank you, everyone, for spending yet another Friday night with us. You guys are the best. Thank you, Anthony, for making me think so much that my head hurts. So, until next week, Parapeeps, stay warm, stay on the path, and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Okay, let's do this. Jog 3 miles before breakfast. Make it to work by 9. Run out for a salad at lunch. Ooh, time to own that meeting at 3. Yes, 10,000 steps. What's next?
Fearless is not hitting snooze. That's the power of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. With more healthy benefits and tools, no one does more to help you live fearless. Sign up at fepblue.org/action by December 14th.